Hey everyone, thanks again for joining up with me tonight for another round of WOW Live. Word on Wednesdays Live. Today is 02/02/2022, Groundhog Day. I just saw a post on Facebook somebody had of groundhog, and what they actually had was chopped ham. I thought, well, that's pretty funny. Made me think of ham salad. I haven't had that in a while. Sounds pretty good. But today is Groundhog Day. Hey, I wanted to show you this. Just found this on Facebook too, just minutes before coming on, so I threw it into the slideshow real quick. Scientists have discovered, this is from the Institute for Creation Research, that's what ICR.org means. Scientists have discovered mummified dinosaur skin. All right, so that's not like skin that's turned to stone or something like that. That's just dried, eviscerated kind of tissue of dinosaur skin. That's what mummified means, basically. It's dehydrated, I guess, right? You add a little bit of water and you've got dinosaur skin. Also, they found dinosaur blood hemoglobin, which is totally fascinating. We're talking about creatures who are supposed to be 90 million to 100 million years old or more. And then dried up eyeball retinas from Plesiosaur. Wow, wonder who recognized that. Wonder if they were blue or brown-eyed. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Maybe green-eyed considering, what they were. So anyhow, just thought I would say this is where we're at, okay? We ended the last lesson talking about paleontologist Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her discovery of soft tissue inside the bones of a T-Rex. And what you're looking at here, we saw this last week, is a magnified view of soft dinosaur tissue taken from a dinosaur bone. A T-Rex bone that she had, it kind of disintegrated in the solution that they had, but the bone material, but this kind of stuff was left behind, soft tissue inside the bone. It seems, folks, that dinosaur bones are not nearly as old as is claimed. Of course, evolutionists will not change their minds over this. They are committed to their belief system, and they're trying to find ways to explain this situation. But it's not exactly an easy problem to solve. They can speculate all day long, but they're never going to be able to prove something could preserve something for millions of years, I don't think. I don't see how they would possibly be able to prove that, seeing as they aren't going to be around that long themselves. Dr. Minton, David Minton, is a creationist scientist, or was. He passed away back in December. I believe it was December. He was with Answers in Genesis, and he wrote in a 2012 article, and we looked at this last week as well, just kind of a quick review here. An obvious question, he said, arises from Schweitzer's work. Is it even remotely plausible that blood vessels, cells, and protein fragments can exist largely intact over 68 million years? While many consider such long-term preservation of tissue and cells to be very unlikely, the problem is that no human or animal remains are known with certainty to be 68 million years old. But if creationists are right, dinosaurs died off only 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. So, would we expect the preservation of vessels, cells, and complex molecules of the type that Schweitzer reports for biological tissues historically known to be 3,000 to 4,000 years old? The answer, he says, is yes. Many studies of Egyptian mummies and other humans of this old age, confirmed by historical evidence, show all the sorts of detail Schweitzer reported in her T-Rex. In addition to Egyptian mummies, the Tyrolean Iceman found in the Alps in 1991 and believed to be about 5,000 years old, shows such incredible preservation of DNA and other microscopic detail. We conclude that the preservation of vessels, cells, and complex molecules in dinosaurs is entirely consistent with a young Earth creationist perspective, but is highly implausible with the evolutionist perspective about dinosaurs that died off millions of years ago. At the end of the last lesson, I said that there was even more information we could uncover about soft dinosaur tissue. There are other people who have found soft tissue in fossils besides Mary Schweitzer. They've even found soft tissues in fossils besides dinosaur fossils. There are other fossils that also have soft tissue, and we'll talk about some of that tonight. This is Dr. Mark Armitage. He's a specialist in working with electron microscopes, a skill that's known, not surprisingly, as electron microscopy. In their bio about Mark Armitage, Creation Ministries International says this about him: Mark managed a working electron microscopy laboratory at the Institute for Creation Research in San Diego. In 2003, he moved his laboratory to the Creation Research Society Van Andel Creation Research Center in Arizona. His lab is still vibrant and is still producing publications. Until recently, and I believe this was probably written around 2014, 2015, what I'm reading to you right now, they went on to say, until recently, Mark served as the manager for the electron and confocal microscopy suite in the biology department at California State University, Northridge. Now get this, Mark was suddenly terminated by the biology department when his discovery of soft tissues in Triceratops Horn was published in Acta Histochemica. So Mark found some soft tissue, and he publishes about it, and he loses his job. I looked up Acta Histochemica, and I learned that Acta Histochemica is a classic scientific journal established in 1954, currently focused on basic research and methodological innovations in cell and tissue biology. So it's basically a journal for biology professionals, which allows scientists in the cell and tissue biology fields to publish their work for their peers to read and to review, to critique, and so forth. Mark's work on his discovery of soft tissue found in the horn of a Triceratops resulted in his immediate termination from his position in the biology lab at California State in Northridge. Mark reached the reasonable conclusion with his discovery that dinosaur bones might not be as old as everybody's been saying, and then he lost his job over it. You and I have been taught that science is a pure effort in an honest pursuit of the truth. Well, not always. As I've told you before, there are politics involved in this field of human endeavor, just like there are in other fields of human endeavor. And of course, there is concern about, well, what else? Money. The need for financing to do science research. Last week, I read to you a quote from Mary Schweitzer. She said, "That's the saddest part about doing science in America. You are totally driven by what gets you funding." Science as it is done today, especially in America, as Dr. Schweitzer points out here, is dependent on funding from either wealthy people and institutions with a serious intellectual interest and a firm belief in the research that's being done, or from wealthy people and institutions who view the funding of the research as an investment from which they hope to gain financially in the long term. Now, this kind of approach almost always discourages any novel sort of research into areas that promise little, if any, return. I mean, up till the time Mary Schweitzer found it by accident, people weren't actively looking for soft tissue in dinosaurs. And if there's anything that even looks sketchy at all about anything someone is doing or moves away from what the majority science opinion is saying, well then, that kind of research must be stopped. And that is why people like Dr. Armitage get fired. We all know what the Bible says about the love of money. It's the root of all evils, or a root of all evils. And that's pretty much you can take that to the bank, pardon the expression. So then, what did Mark Armitage exactly find in that Triceratops horn? Well, here we see Dr. Armitage in his private lab. I don't know if you can buy all of that equipment he has there on Amazon or not. I haven't looked to see. I don't even know what exactly all of it is. I know they're microscopes, basically, but there's all kinds. One, I think the one on the right behind his left shoulder, on your right as you're looking at it, that tall thing there, that's probably an electron microscope. I've seen pictures of those in the past, and that looks similar. I know they're big. Anyway, so I don't know if you can get it at Amazon, but maybe so. But I'm sure that it cost him or cost someone who funds his research some serious financial outlay. And there are people who believe in this kind of research into creationist kinds of things. And they know that there's no university who's going to sponsor it. And Mark Armitage is kind of the poster boy for that in a sense, because he lost his job by publishing something that smacked of creationist research. Anyway, I'm personally glad Mark has access to all this equipment. Now, he's holding in his hand there a portion of a Triceratops horn. That specimen was found in Montana at the Hell Creek Formation, which is the same place that Mary Schweitzer's T-Rex bone was found, the one from which she had discovered soft tissue. So, popular place up there. Here's a map of both geological formations up in that area known as Hell Creek, and then there's another one known as Lance. Hell Creek is the gray region that crosses through parts of 4 states. Up in the upper right corner there, you see the gray area beginning up in North Dakota, and it cuts down across the state in a southward direction, of course, into South Dakota. And then it goes up into Montana, close to the Yellowstone River up in there, and then kind of cuts back south again and heads down into Wyoming. It is mostly a deposit of rock from what is known as the Upper Cretaceous period of geologic history. The Upper Cretaceous, and that's spelled Cretaceous, if you're taking notes. The Upper Cretaceous supposedly extended from 99.6 million years ago to 65.5 million years ago. Now, this is something of what the area looks like. Looks wonderful, doesn't it? Just the kind of place you'd love to go on vacation. There's a little water over there, so I don't know what swims in it. But anyway, I would say, of course, that this formation was laid down. Okay, and the depositions were made. The different layers of deposit were laid down, and then everything was kind of washed out, and in such a way that it left these upstanding kind of mesas, I guess, for want of a better term, and other flat areas across the creek over there. You can see, I imagine that's Hell Creek there. Across from that is kind of a flat area. All of that was washed out, laid down, and then washed out by the hydrologic dynamics of the Great Flood of Noah's time. The flood did this just a few thousand years ago. It's not 100 million years old, all right? So here is the Triceratops horn that Mark Armitage uncovered in Montana. He doesn't have it totally uncovered yet. And when I looked at that, I'm thinking to myself, with the rocks all around it, and it's the same color as them and everything, I thought, yeah, it would take a trained eye to be able to recognize that kind of poking out of the ground. I'm not sure exactly, because it's the same color as everything. To me, it looks just like a kind of a unusual, but basically a rock poking out of the ground, and you're surrounded by rocks, so why wouldn't it be a rock, right? But here's the same horn after some further excavation and some on-site cleaning of it. The specimen looks like it's nearly 3 feet long based on that tape measure someone's holding there. To get a little perspective on the size of these horns, here's a photo that accompanies an online article that's about Mark Armitage's firing by California State University. And then it also covers his subsequent lawsuit against the university for this firing. This article that I'm going to read some of it to you, it was taken from a July 31st, 2014 USA Today article entitled "New Discovery May Have Prompted Early Termination of California State University Northridge Professor." The article says in part, A lawsuit, whoops, I don't have it on here. Sorry about that. A lawsuit was filed by Pacific Justice Institute, PJI, last Tuesday in Los Angeles against the Board of Trustees of California State University Northridge after one of the university's scientists was fired, which the lawsuit alleges to be discrimination of religion. Now, see, this is a fascinating story for the press to get a hold of. Okay, you have a university, and they fired a guy, and the lawsuit is alleging he was fired because of discrimination of his religious beliefs. Very interesting. The whole science and religion conflict is just, this thing's just got it all in here for it to be a hot off the press kind of story. Well, the termination happened shortly after the scientist Mark Armitage published a paper in the journal Acta Histochemica detailing his discovery of soft tissue on a Triceratops bone he found at a dig at the Hell Creek Formation in Montana. This was a significant discovery because it suggests that dinosaurs populated the Earth only thousands of years ago instead of going extinct 60 million years ago. It's interesting that the press, the writer put that in there. And then there's a quote here from a guy named Brad Dacus, who is the president, or Dacus, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, president of PJI, and the law firm that's representing him or whatever. And here's what he said. Scientific evidence should never be discarded simply because it parallels religious beliefs. Conversely, students and professors should not be fired just because they find scientific evidence that parallels religious beliefs. So he's saying that he was fired unjustly. And I don't have it noted here in my notes anywhere else, but I will tell you at the outset that Mark Armitage won his case against the university. Going on in the article, Armitage says in a formal complaint of discrimination letter that shortly after the discovery, one of his colleagues shouted, "We are not going to tolerate any of your religion in this department." So a man digs up a dinosaur bone, and in that bone, it's in the horn actually, he finds soft tissue. And he publishes a paper on his findings, and this is the response he gets from another scientist in his department. "We're not going to tolerate your religion." It's hilarious. We're only going to tolerate our religion, okay, because they have a belief system too. Don't let them kid you. This next slide shows a still shot. This is from a video that was taken through a powerful microscope in Mark's lab. This is the soft tissue that he found inside the Triceratops horn. I'm going to attempt to show you through 6 separate slides, including this one, that this material is actually stretchy. In the next slide, you can see the same specimen of tissue there, only now it is beginning to be stretched, so it looks a little thinner on there, right? And you can see the 2 points of the 2 pairs of tweezers that Mark is using to tug at the top and the bottom of the tissue. Now here, you can see the material is being stretched even further. Remember, according to the conventional evolutionary viewpoint, this soft tissue is supposed to be around 70 to 80 million years old, and it's stretching as easily as anything. If you watch the video of this ever, you get a chance, it stretches so easily. Same with what Mary Schweitzer had under her microscope. Now on this slide, you can see the tissue is at its maximum stretching point. And there's quite a groove there where the material is starting to kind of bow under the stress of those 2 sets of tweezers. It looks rather like the skin on a deep-fried piece of KFC chicken or something, doesn't it? Maybe that's the kind that Fred and Barney ate back there in Bedrock or something. I don't know. But anyway, notice here in this picture, Mark has released the tweezer's hold on the tissue, and the tissue, as expected, retracts back to close to its original appearance. Elasticity is almost like this is almost impossible to believe in something that is supposedly millions of years old. But there is this elasticity. So what does that mean? On this final slide, instead of top to bottom, Mark is stretching the tissue side to side. Now what I would like to do is cycle back and forth through these 6 slides a couple of times, once backward again and then once forward, once again a little faster, to give you a better sense of the elasticity here. So let's see. We'll just go back this way. Of course, like I say, we're working backward. Now it's going to be released a little bit of the tension, and then even more so, and then back to the original. All right? So you can see what's going on. Now let me go forward, and I'll go forward a little faster than that even, so you can get a sense of motion here. Yeah. Yep, that's where it ends on that part there. One of the criticisms of the idea that soft dinosaur tissue proves that dinosaurs are not millions of years old but are much younger, one of the criticisms of that idea is that if a specimen is locked away underground, surrounded by rock, it's therefore preserved. Okay? Now here's the thing about this. No one had ever thought of that possibility before. You know, no one ever thought, wow, I bet if that's been preserved in the rock, there's soft tissue inside those bones. Nobody ever said, nobody ever looked for that, nobody ever did anything until soft tissue was accidentally found in Mary Schweitzer's lab. All right. After the soft tissue is discovered, it's then that someone proposes the idea that this tissue was preserved because it was cut off from oxygen and water and all the accompanying microbes and destruction and decay that's like roadkills experience every day, right? Okay. So, you know, the idea there is, of course, no one thought of this until the soft tissue is discovered. Then they had to have an idea. And then this came out. Mark Armitage experienced just such a criticism of his soft tissue work from Dr. Hugh Ross. Now, Dr. Hugh Ross is an astronomer. All right, he's not a paleontologist. He heads up a Christian organization called Reasons to Believe. Now, Dr. Ross believes that the Earth is millions of years old. He holds to a view that it's called progressive creationism, which basically ignores the 6 days of creation in Genesis chapter 1, and then claims that God intervened in Earth history every few million years or so, where he created new things and kept advancing the product, okay, until it finally reached the stage where he was happy with what he had. Like he couldn't do that immediately, you know. I think progressive creationist people hold this view because what they're trying to do is to maintain some kind of personal credibility among atheistic evolutionists, some sort of scientific respectability or something that they're aiming for. And so they come up with ideas like this. You know, look, guys, we think the Earth is old just like you do. So you want to talk about Jesus? It's kind of that kind of approach. Of course, atheists can't really tolerate any kind of creationism, okay? And progressive creationists like you, Ross, are no exception to that. It's sort of like they would view you, Ross, as being kind of a hypocrite, you know. You're kind of doing a bait and switch here on me, Ross. You know, you're laying down this idea that you believe in millions of years, but you know, you're trying to get me to come over and say, well, hi, brother, and then you're going to try to convert me to your religion, you see. I don't know if that's exactly right, but Reasons to Believe certainly sounds like that kind of a ministry just by its very name. In any case, you, Ross, could not really let the idea of soft dinosaur tissue serve as proof that dinosaurs are young, not old. Okay? He couldn't do that. He couldn't leave it alone. He's not a paleontologist. He's not a biologist. He's an astronomer. But he just knows that given the right conditions, this soft dinosaur tissue would stay soft for millions of years. Soft tissue for 100 million years. Wow, that kind of sounds like a great slogan for toilet paper. You know, soft tissue for 100 million years. Presented to you by a Velociraptor. All right. At any rate, Dr. Mark Armitage took issue with Dr. Ross's claims. So here's what Mark had to say about the idea that a dinosaur fossil buried under many feet of rock would stay soft on the inside. He says, Dr. Ross says that if a sample is isolated from any exposure to bacteria and oxygen, then the soft tissue evidence easily can be preserved for over 100 million years. Really, Dr. Ross? And you have experimental evidence to show that? Mark goes on to say, we did a blast DNA analysis of the Triceratops horn, looking for whatever DNA might be there, okay? A blast DNA analysis of the Triceratops horn, not the frill, the big wide part at the top that makes a horn on its head kind of thing, or a shield or whatever, but the horn itself, just on the horn, and we found the DNA of over 30 bacteria, plants, fungal bodies. We found insects and rodent DNA. And so the horn was obviously not isolated from oxygen or organisms. In fact, it was a foot below the Montana surface, only a foot below, not buried deep. And that was subjected to water penetration, to the freeze and thaw cycle, to who knows what else. I mean, there's rodent DNA on there. The mice and the rats could smell something, okay? And so your claim, Dr. Ross, is specious, because these were not cut off from bacteria and oxygen. In fact, I have photographs of plant roots and fungal hyphae, which is sort of like, it's not a high-fidelity system, okay? I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's sort of like fungal roots, okay? I have plant roots and fungal roots traveling through the horn right next to osteocytes, which are the bone cells, the soft bone cells. So the reality is, folks, Mark's Triceratops horn was not buried so deeply in the rock that for 100 million years it was protected from oxygen and water and bugs and microbes and heat and cold and wind and scorching sunlight and whatever else might contribute to decomposition of soft material in the bone. Instead, it was right close to the surface. And that soft tissue still survived close to the surface. Let's face the facts, folks. That Triceratops did not live 100 million years ago. It died only a few thousand years ago in a catastrophic global flood event which wiped out all land-dwelling life. To me, that is a reason to believe, Dr. Hugh Ross. That's a reason to believe that God's word is true and men are liars. And that included all the dinosaurs on the face of the earth, too. Wiped them all out. The flood is the event that buried Mark Armitage's Triceratops, along with nearly all the other fossils on Earth. And this soft tissue is powerful evidence that dinosaurs are young. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I'm convinced that there were dinosaurs on Noah's Ark. But we'll get to that a little bit later. On May the 3rd, 2014, Mark Armitage said this: "My prediction is this. The fossil record is full of soft tissue. This is the norm rather than the exception. That's my prediction. So I invite whomever to prove me wrong. Go out and dig up the fossils. Do the decalcification. Do the microscopy. In fact, I will teach you myself if you don't know how to do it, or even if you don't know how to say it. I'm sure he would set me straight on that. Because I want you to prove me wrong," he says. "If I'm wrong, I want to know it." So soft tissue is the rule, not the exception. Hey, remember this guy from last week's lesson? Geologist Dave Nutting recounted his experience as a teenager when he was out looking for dinosaur fossils. He said, "When I was a youngster at about 13, 14, 15, all the way through there, I used to be able to cut and polish a huge amount of dinosaur bones. And as I was cutting this dinosaur bone, making jewelry, making polished specimens, etc., once in a while, I would actually be grinding into this material, and I would smell this horrible, rotten egg smell. So what does a decomposing dinosaur smell like? Rotten eggs. Kind of like a lot of things decomposing. Hey, that smell would attract rodents in a desert, I'm sure of it. So Dave Nutting's experience seems to contradict what Mark Armitage has predicted. Or corroborate, not contradict. I read my language right. Completely wrong there. I need more help than Mark Armitage may be able to give. It corroborates what Mark Armitage has predicted. Soft tissue in the fossil record is the norm. It's not the exception. It's not that some unique set of circumstances would allow for just a few fossils to happen to have some soft tissue inside. Rather, soft tissue was regularly preserved. And not just in dinosaurs, but in all kinds of life. And that's because the vast majority of the fossils were buried in a rapidly occurring global water-driven geological catastrophic event just a few thousand years ago. Case in point. Here's a photo from Wikipedia showing some marine worms that live under the ocean. That's a photograph of actual living marine worms. Wikipedia says there. Here's some words I'm going to really foul up, I get. Cyboglinide marine worms, such as the beard worms shown here, live on the seafloor at depths ranging anywhere from 100 meters to 10,000 meters. That's 300 to 30,000 feet. So that's quite deep. But these worms live down there. So now that you've got some idea of what sea worms look like, listen to this fascinating news from an October 2014 article published at the Creation Ministry International website, which is www.creation.com. Easiest thing to remember, creation.com. They got the information from an article that was published in April of 2014 in the Journal of Paleontology. So this is a scientific journal. And it says, they say in their article, the remains of marine worms dated at 550 million years old, found in Russia, have been examined by a team of researchers led by Professor Moguzata Mochilowska. There you go. Took me a while working with that pronunciation. That pronunciation's actually in the article for us. So, Moguzata Mochilowska, the professor at Uppsala University in Sweden. And they found that the tube casings of the seabed worms Sabellitis cambriensis were still soft and flexible. After comprehensive laboratory analysis, the researchers assessed the seabed worm's remains to be still composed of the original organic compounds. Still soft and flexible, still composed of the original organic compounds. They ruled out the possibility of modern contaminants and of preservation by various means of mineralization. Mineralizing, of course, is like a coating or where material gets filled up with rock and turns into rock. Anyway, in the researchers' own words from their Journal of Paleontology paper, the Sabellites organic body is preserved without permineralization. That's the process I just tried to describe you. Minerals work into the cellular material and dissolve and kind of work their way in there and replace the cellular material with rock, but it's in the shape of the cell and so forth. Anyway, minerals have not replicated any part of the soft tissue. That's just what I was talking about there. It replicates part of the soft tissue. And then they go on to say, and the carbonaceous material of the wall is primary, meaning it's the original stuff, preserving the original layering of the wall, its texture, and fabrics. And further, their article in the Journal of Paleontology says, the tube of S. cambriensis was flexible, as shown by its soft deformation and preservation, and get this, and composed of fibers perfect in habit and parallel arranged in sheets and then sheets in layers. This fibrous material was found. According to electron microscope photographs, now this is the Creation Ministries article again, accompanying electron microscope photographs showed these perfect in-habit fibers to be less than 0.005 of a millimeter wide. Yet these delicate fibers are still soft after supposedly 500 million years. 500 million years old? That's like almost 5 times the age of that dinosaur horn, that Triceratops horn. It is 5 times the age of that. That's the claim for these Sabellites cambriensis, these sea worms. Their fossils are found in what is known as the Cambrian layer of the geologic column. That's where they get the Cambriensis in S. cambriensis, the scientific name for them. It's in the Cambrian layer. It's kind of like Cam, C-A-M, with my name at the end, B-R-I-A-N, Cambrian. Okay, Cambrian. Anyway, any fossils found in that layer are assessed at 500 million or half a billion years old. That's nearly 5 times as old as they claim the dinosaurs of the Cretaceous rock layers to be. But soft tissue has been found in both the dinosaurs and in these Cambrian critters. The point is, folks, these dead animals, they aren't that old. They didn't die that long ago. They can't be that old, period. They died at the same time in the Genesis flood. As I've said in previous lessons, the concept of vast ages of time is absolutely necessary for those people who refuse to believe in the Creator God of the Bible. They're the ones who came up with this. Here's why. Since they reject God and His Word, they are then compelled to come up with alternate explanations on how everything got here. Remember, they can't allow a divine foot in the door, right? That's what the one scientist said. And so this, with the vast ages, millions and millions of years, this is what they've come up with. It's the only thing that works. They need that time. And that's why you can't have soft tissue in dinosaur bones being touted as being, well, that means they're young. You have to find some kind of alternate explanation for this. That's a tough problem for them to solve. I'll tell you that. They won't solve it. Romans 1 describes the approach and the attitude of the godless in these kinds of things. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen. Everybody knows God's there because why? Because being understood by the things that have been made, the things that He made, show that He is there. Even His eternal power and Godhead are apparent because of the created things, so that they are without excuse. They can't say, you didn't give me enough evidence to believe in you. Because although they knew God was there, they did not glorify Him as God. I reject you as my God. Nor were they thankful, but they became futile in their thoughts, vain in their thinking, empty in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they call themselves professors after all, right? Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. In other words, changing the glory of the living God into images and worshiping images of dying and dead men and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. All these things that are dying. They've elevated that on a pedestal and are bowing before that. That's what he's saying. Therefore, because of that, God also gave them up to uncleanness. If you're going to worship the devil, you're going to live like the devil, okay? Give them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and they worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Our modern world certainly does worship and serve the creatures, worships and serves the created things, rather than worshiping the Creator God Himself. It's so twisted. It's so twisted. Evolution is almost like a form of ancestor worship. Through an act of faith and belief, credibility and worth, or worthship, worthiness, are given to an imaginary history that cannot be confirmed, even through their own scientific reasoning, which they claim is the only pathway to the truth. But yet it cannot do anything to confirm what they believe. And as more evidence is uncovered, obviously it's going against the grain of that evolutionary story. It's even getting harder for them to offer up convincing evidence. Soft tissue in fossils betrays the falsehood that's been perpetrated for nearly 200 years. And that same soft tissue lends confirmation to what the Bible has been telling mankind for thousands of years. It's better to trust in God than to put your confidence in men. Psalm 118:8, my life verse. The Institute for Creation Research, ICR, also posted this on their Facebook page just this past Monday, January 31st. We saw about the different kinds of tissue that scientists have found. Now here's this. I guess they're trying to help me out with my recent lessons. Okay, look at what it says here. The presence of actual undecayed tissues in fossils found at virtually every level of the geologic column, every layer of dirt going back in time from top to bottom, from the Cretaceous up there so far in the 90 million year range, all the way down to the Cambrian, which in its 500 million year range. Okay, every level of the geologic column they have found, virtually every level, undecayed tissue in fossils. And that completely, they say, completely undermines evolution's deep time paradigm. For clarification, deep time is a shorthand kind of reference to the idea of millions of years. You know, that many years goes very, very deep back in time. So it's deep time, is the thought. And a paradigm is a, quote, framework containing the basic assumptions, ways of thinking, and methodology that are commonly accepted by members of a scientific community. They all kind of have joined in and said, this is what we believe together, okay? That's their church. Basically, all this soft tissue evidence completely destroys the idea that life has come into existence and then slowly, somehow, and then slowly, gradually, and imperceptibly, you can't even observe it changing, changes and develops an increasing diversity and complexity, and that's what's led to all the life forms we see today. But this soft tissue evidence destroys all of that because it takes away their time, the very thing that they need. Evolution is bogus, folks. Okay, now here's your homework assignment for next week. I want you to study and commit to memory all the information on this chart so that you can completely reproduce it as your upcoming exam next Wednesday. All right? So that's your task at hand. Obviously, I'm just kidding. What in the world is this anyway? Well, the nutrition information from a box of cereal, could that be? No. But what you see here is a regularly maintained and updated list that can be found on the Real Science Radio website. REAL, Real Science Radio, rsr.org, I think it is. What we see here is a list of, quote, biomaterial fossil papers, articles submitted for peer review in scientific journals. Each row of information represents a research paper, a research article that is published in a scientific journal on the discovery and cataloging of, quote, surviving and endogenous biological material. Endogenous is it originated from within an organism, this tissue, a living thing left this behind, a surviving endogenous biological material. And the biomaterial fossil can be both tissue and DNA, and they're talking about soft tissue here. What you can see on here is on this screenshot that I captured from their website. You see the listing here of 34 published articles and then information about each one in the columns going from left to right. Right? We can see article number 83 all the way at the bottom of the page there, through and including the most recent article at the very top, number 116. Okay, 83. This means there are 82 more articles further down the list. Okay, numbers 115 and 116 were published in 2021, and Article 1, way at the beginning of the list, down at the bottom, was published way back in 1954. So this has been going on a long time. They found soft tissue back in 1954, and I guess wrote a paper about what they found. I don't know what all it was, but interesting. That's before I was born. I said, that's back in the days of the dinosaurs. The columns tell us the year of publication, okay, and then the number, of course, and then it's the year of the publication, the description of the article that was published, and then it lists the alleged age or evolutionary age of the specimen measured in millions of years. So that will tell you what layer it came from, the Cretaceous, the Cambrian, or somewhere in between, the Audacious, I don't know, whatever. The authors and publication information comes next, and then links to where you can find the article online and so on. So that's the kind of information that they have here. It's really kind of fantastic stuff. So I think you can see that this soft tissue phenomenon is not just coming from Mary Schweitzer. It's not just coming from Mary Schweitzer and Mark Armitage. As Mark predicted, soft tissue in the fossil record is the norm rather than the exception. So I hope you get the benefit of that tonight, what this soft tissue really means. Okay, to wrap up what we have seen about dinosaurs in the Bible, just in brief, here is an overview then of what we can say the Bible says about the story of dinosaurs. This is the Bible's viewpoint on this now. We've heard the evolutionist viewpoint. Now we're talking about what the Bible says. Like all living things, dinosaurs were created during the creation week as described in Genesis 1. All living things are summarized in Genesis 1 under generalized categories, which I've shown in red here on the two slides I'm going to show you. It's from Genesis 1, verses 20 to 24. And then God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves with which the waters abound, so other water creatures as well, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. That's a evening, morning, 24-hour day period. Okay. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind," and it was so. On day 5, God created sea dwellers and the birds. On day 6, he made the land-dwelling creatures, including mankind, which I didn't go that far. Now, the word dinosaur, as we use it today, that applies to the land-dwelling animals only. Okay, dinosaurs, there's no dinosaurs technically, according to them, who live in the water. However, there are also often water dwellers who are mentioned whenever talking about dinosaurs. Okay, the term beast of the earth in Genesis 1:24 that you see right there, the very last one, that includes the dinosaurs. And then in verse 21, the term great sea creatures would include creatures like these. There was the giant mosasaur, the one that's seen in the movie Jurassic World. Okay, that's the mosasaur. That's where they got the eye tissue, the retina tissue, the dried retina tissue or whatever that we read about earlier at the beginning of the night. Another great sea creature would be the Plesiosaur. He's not as big. This other thing is huge, by the way. That mosasaur back there, I wish I'd have got something that had some scale on it. That thing is monstrously huge. We might be about as big as one of those teeth there, if I'm roughly guessing the size of this thing. It's like a huge whale almost sort of thing. Anyway, the Plesiosaur. Some people think the alleged sea monster in Loch Ness, Scotland, Nessie, maybe Nessie might be a Plesiosaur. Okay, long neck kind of swimming dinosaur with big flippers and that kind of thing. And yet a third kind would be the Ichthyosaur. Now the Ichthyosaur at first glance looks like a fish, maybe sort of like a dolphin with a really long nose or whatever. In fact, the Greek word ichthys means fish, but as you can see, this mother Ichthyosaur, because they've cut out a little window there, has a baby in her womb. Now, fish lay eggs, okay? But so obviously she's much more like a mammal. She's not a fish. The baby's on the inside. And here is how they know that ichthyosaurs gave live birth to their offspring. This is a fossilized ichthyosaur who, no doubt, due to the trauma of the catastrophic event which killed her, was buried while in the very act of giving birth. She gets this hyper-stress survival kind of fight-or-flight mechanism. There's no place to go. She's wiped out, and in all that stress, she gives birth, and it gets frozen in time like this. Amazing. Obviously, fossilization is not a slow, gradual process, all right? She was buried, giving birth to a baby at the time. Amazing. These fossilized creatures were rapidly buried, folks, in the catastrophic event known as the global flood. By the way, a January 20th, 2021 article on Creation Ministry International's website talks about the discovery of soft external tissue, or the demineralized skin of a buried ichthyosaur. So soft tissue has been found on one of these things. And there was even evidence in that of some kind of blubber, rather like a seagoing mammal would have, like a whale, or perhaps a walrus, or a sea lion, or something like that. So now scientists are debating whether the ichthyosaur was warm-blooded or cold-blooded. So they've got another problem. Interestingly, the Hebrew word that is translated as great sea creatures, or sea creature actually in Genesis 1:21, is the word tanin, Tannin, and the I is like a long E. So tanin, according to the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon, tanin means serpent, dragon, sea monster. In the King James Version, the word tanin is translated as dragon 21 times. It's translated as serpent 3 times. It's translated as whale in the King James Version 3 times, including in Genesis 21, I think is where we were. You would find whale there in your King James Version. And then once it's translated as sea monster. Recall that we learned the word dragon was the word that was used to identify large reptilian creatures before the word dinosaur was invented in 1841. Remember that English guy who would say, "Oh, that's a dragon," when he saw a picture of a dinosaur or something. Anyway, Noah was told to take 2 of every kind of land-dwelling animal with him onto the ark. Right? "And of every living thing, of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, of animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive." They're going to come to him. God sends them, brings them to him. "And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you, and also for them." So bring food they're going to eat, okay? This means that 2 of every sort of land-dwelling dinosaur would have been on the ark. Every kind of them, not every variety or every various kinds. I mean, it's not really known how many kinds of dinosaurs Noah understood there to be, or what God actually sent him. For example, just think about the cat family, the feline family, right? It's doubtful that Noah took lions and tigers and leopards and cougars and bobcats and lynx and house cats and Siamese and all of that onto the ark or whatever. No, he took 2 representatives, a male and a female, of the cat kind. The varieties that we know today developed later, after the flood, over generations and generations, due to isolation of their breeding populations into localized places. There was a lot of water, and animals could. The water was down, and a lot of it landlocked and so forth, and so there were bridges between land surfaces or continents or whatever, and they could get from one place to another, and then the land rose back up, the water rose back up and cut off those land bridges, and so they're isolated now. That's why Australia has some pretty strange creatures down there. and also Madagascar, the island, and so forth. And it's due to that kind of isolation, and also due to the variabilities found in those two original ark-bound individuals' feline DNA. The DNA is variable, all right, and all kinds of things could manifest over time, and that's what happened, and why you have so many different kinds of cats from the original cat kind with all the variability on their DNA. And the same would be true of all the animals taken, the dogs, cats, birds, everything, including the dinosaurs, all right? Size would be an issue also, of course, for the ark. The question's often asked, how could Noah fit all those animals on the ark? And now you're throwing dinosaurs into the mix. Well, we don't have time tonight to go into all the various ways of answering that question. There's some really good ones. There have been feasibility studies done and everything else. But it's certainly possible for God to have sent Noah juvenile animals rather than full-grown ones. You don't have to take the old grandfather. You don't want to do that, considering the nature of the mission you're going on. Young animals would require less space, right? They would likely sleep more for the approximately 1 year that everyone was going to spend on that boat. And also due to a kind of hibernation that probably would set in for younger ones, they wouldn't eat as much either. And on the other side, I mean, I can see God preparing them by having them stock up on food, eat a lot of stuff, sleep, only need a little bit of nutrition throughout the year, not nearly as much as they would on a regular basis, and then be able to find things to eat on the other side. God would take care of the animals. He notes every sparrow. Certainly he would care for every dinosaur, every cat, every dog. And on the other side of the flood, then, young animals being taken initially, they would be healthier than adults, have a better survivability rate. And the point of taking them on board, of course, is for them to survive in the post-flood world. So what happened to the dinosaurs after they came off the ark? Well, likely several things. Some may have eventually succumbed to the rapid climate change, which would have happened right after the Great Flood. Such a disaster would have wreaked havoc upon the Earth's climate globally. I mean, it just would have really messed things up. Creationists believe there was one great ice age, and only one, and it happened shortly after the flood. There's plenty of evidence that ice was further south than what it is today. That ice age could have led to extinction of some of the dinosaurs that were born after the flood. Maybe sometime after the flood. Some of them may not be able to have made it. Another event which could have impacted the post-flood dinosaur population is human beings hunting them into extinction. Here you have a depiction on a Babylonian thing, or Sumerian thing, Mesopotamian anyway, the Babylonian myth of Marduk slaying the mother goddess who had taken the form of Tiamat the dragon. All right, chaos. All right, this could be an early example of what men generally were doing to dinosaurs. Nimrod in the Bible is considered to be a great hunter before the Lord. Maybe he was a dragon slayer. All right, possible. And now, with all this, we start to circle back onto the things that we've already seen in this class, such as Job and the great behemoth that God told him to behold. Job, of course, lived after the flood, but he lived likely before Abraham's time. And by the way, there are references to snow that you'll find in the book of Job, which suggests the possibility that the post-flood ice age may have been happening in Job's time. Job may be a book from the ice age. Interesting. And is it possible, as we close out this evening, is it possible that perhaps some kinds of dinosaur-like creatures are still living today? Maybe. Who really knows? Maybe they survived on into this. It was not too long ago, 1938 actually, when a coelacanth was found, a fish off the coast of Malaysia, I believe, or Indonesia. Sorry, Indonesia, and that was considered to be extinct from the time of the dinosaurs. They found coelacanths in the fossil record, but then somebody caught one in 1938, and that kind of changed everything. In the African Congo, there are stories of a creature that the locals call Mokele Amembe. And in some evening, if time permits, maybe we'll return to this question. Is it possible that some kinds of dinosaur-like creatures still are out there. Maybe, can't make a big deal out of that, but it's sure a lot of fun to consider together and speculate, which it is speculation. We can't know for sure, but there are eyewitnesses who've seen some things. So anyway, well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I appreciate you coming out. We made it right to 8 o'clock, exactly an hour, and that's pretty cool. So I'll let you go, and we'll see you again soon. Hang in there through the big ice age that's coming over the weekend, maybe, Thursday into Friday, or whatever. Maybe we won't get too much of that here. Let's hope not. Thank you, Lord, for all you do for us. You're a great and mighty God. In Jesus' name, amen.